Welcome to Lift Up, a short form spinoff of the Behind the Wind podcast. Lift Up was created for quick, meaningful conversations, short episodes that explore timely ideas, practical lessons, and thought provoking topics across leadership, growth, business, and life. Each episode is designed to offer something you can learn today and apply tomorrow. Think of it as a spark, concise insights, real perspective, and actionable takeaways delivered in just a few minutes.
All right, it's that time again. One of the biggest misconceptions employees have is that leadership sits around a conference table asking themselves, who deserves a raise this year? And honestly, the reality is much less exciting. We're really trying to solve 6 different compensation problems with enough money to solve maybe 2 of them. This isn't an HR discussion, it's really a discussion about resource allocation. Every raise starts with one constraint. Most organizations don't begin with employees, they begin with a number, right? A budget. Maybe we have 3% payroll budget this year. Maybe we have 4%. Perhaps we have a $250,000 salary adjustment or market adjustment budget. Everything after that just becomes an allocation problem. Every dollar spent in one place can't be spent somewhere else. Opportunity costs apply to compensation just like any other investment. So let's talk about maybe the 5 reasons people do get raises. One, the most obvious, right? Merit. We're rewarding contribution or performance. Has the individual perhaps become more valuable? Maybe they went through some additional training. Are they exceeding expectations for their particular position? Maybe we hired them in at a lower rate in the market just to find out that this person really performs at a level that's much higher than that. What would it cost to replace that person if they left? I don't know. Maybe the skill set has suddenly become more valuable, and as a result, wages have moved. The market's not about performance; it's about retention. It's about making sure that the individual feels like they're being appropriately compensated. Does the individual potentially have significant institutional knowledge? Is this somebody that would likely slow down the organization? Let's be honest about that one, though, right? Everybody's replaceable at some point. I'm not irreplaceable, but some people do cause more friction than others when they leave. Another thing that we've got to address as managers is internal equity, right? We need to look across our team and make sure that employees that hold the same job are being paid similarly, especially if they're performing at the same level. Maybe we need to look at promotion. Here's somebody who has reached beyond their particular roles and responsibilities, and they have an opportunity to lead a team as opposed to just being an individual contributor. That promotion, to some extent is a reward, but other than that, it's really a recognition that they're filling a different need for the organization. All right, so now you got these 5 different ways you got to spend your budget. What are we going to do about that? Here's an example. I've got an outstanding performer, and they're already at a market competitive salary. Do I look at just a merit increase? And if I do, how big a merit increase are we really looking at? Perhaps I have an average performer, but they're being paid at 15% of the market. I may have to give that person a market adjustment that on paper, from a comparison perspective, seems out of line with their performance. Maybe you have an individual who's just been promoted and they've received a 10% increase. Here we got to talk about something that's commonly referred to as salary increase velocity. After a while, an individual gets trained or gets an expectation set that every year they're going to get a 10% increase, and that's just not realistic. Perhaps you have an employee who's a top performer but is already at the max of their salary range. Do you give them just the minimum salary increase for the year? Can you really afford to have that individual who's a high performer, likely has significant information for your organization, walk out the door because they feel slighted by a very small salary increase? In that particular case, one of the things we look at is perhaps a retention bonus of some kind that helps keep our salary increase or our salaries down year over year, but helps that high performer feel valued. Maybe you've got an individual that's again just quiet, reliable, but nobody seems to notice them or recognize them. And then suddenly they resign. You know, you've got to be very, very careful about how you think about compensation for your individuals across a larger team. Government contracting, I got to tell you, it just makes this that much harder. Unlike many businesses, government contractors often can't simply increase our prices. Maybe we've got a firm fixed price contract. If we increase salary, then we reduce our profit, and then revenue stays the same. Maybe we're in a time and materials contract and the billable labor categories have been set and the customer has, ceilings or expectations about what you're going to charge from a labor perspective. And then what happens at the end of that whole process? We get into a recompete. And honestly, this is where it gets even more difficult. Imagine you're a government contractor and you've had this contractor for like 5 years. And during that time, you've checked all 5 of those boxes. You've rewarded high performers. You've corrected market inequities. You've promoted employees. You've retained critical talent. And you've invested in your workforce. These investments become part of your permanent labor costs. And now the contract is recompeted. Your competitor gets to build that proposal from scratch, and they may assume that they can hire talent in today's market rates. Or they may assume that they'll selectively hire some of the incumbent staff while replacing others over time. They're bidding from a clean sheet of paper, and the incumbent is not. The incumbent's problem really becomes we can't honestly, realistically tell our folks, good news, everybody, we won the contract, but everybody needs to take a pay cut because, obviously that's not how employment works. So every investment we've made over the last 5 years becomes part of our labor costs. We're carrying this into the next competition. That doesn't make the competitor wrong or the competition unfair. It just means that we're dealing with different economic realities in the individual that's coming in. So why do managers and employees talk past each other? Why don't employees necessarily understand what the manager is trying to communicate through that salary increase? It's because they're asking themselves, what do I deserve? When the manager is asking, what problem should I solve with this dollar this year? And both questions are legitimate. They're just solving different problems. Employees see one career and managers have to look at an entire workforce. So what should we do as leaders? Well, perhaps you don't try to solve every compensation problem every year. Develop a philosophy. Maybe as a leadership team, you decide this year we're really going to focus on market gaps. And next year we're going to make sure that our talent, our key talent is properly rewarded. So we keep those people around. Consistency creates trust, but in some cases, consistency, as I mentioned, from a velocity perspective, can cause challenges with your employees. Random decisions don't help your employees understand what your strategy is. And frankly, employees don't have to agree with that strategy, but they should at least understand how those decisions are made. Ultimately, compensation isn't just about money, it's about priorities. It's about balancing performance, retention, competitiveness, internal equity, customer expectations, employee expectations, profitability, and even future growth, all with one finite budget. Leadership is not finding perfect answers. And frankly, if it was, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now because I guarantee I wouldn't be making those perfect decisions every time. It's about making thoughtful trade-offs. And here's the part I think we really need to focus in on as leaders. Employees aren't going to be very sympathetic for the managers or the organization trying to sort through all of this. And honestly, why should they? Their responsibility is to advocate for themselves and for their families. And leadership's responsibility is to balance the needs of every employee, every customer, and the long-term health of the business. Those perspectives are different by design. The goal isn't for everyone to feel the same pressure. The goal is for everyone to understand that pressure and understand the outcomes.